Let's talk about organizing your content in the body of a speaking presentation. Obviously, the body of your presentation is where you place the main points you want to address during your presentation. So it is vitally important to have your content organized and developed. The first place to begin is knowing what your main topic for speaking is. That way you can develop a central message that is appropriate for your audience, purpose, and context. Once you have that main topic, you need to consider what are the main points you want to speak about. Again, the number of main points you have might depend on your overall purpose of your speech, but it's a good idea to keep it to roughly 2 or 3 main points or ideas if possible. If you find that you have more, you can always try to consolidate them into one main point or incorporate it with another point that you already have. You want your main points to flow well and make sense to your audience, and that requires consideration of how you organize your ideas. So let's look at a few ways that you can organize your ideas. One simple approach is to organize your ideas by categories. In categorical organization, you are arranging your ideas by different topics that are all helping to support your main purpose and message. For example, if you're looking to inform a group of college students about a service learning trip to Hawaii, you could develop a set of main topics or categories that work towards that main purpose. You can organize topics about what students will experience, where students would be staying, and finally, the specific requirements for involvement. Each point supports the overall main idea and purpose. Another way to organize your ideas is through a compare and contrast organization. When using this method, you would organize main points to show your audience the differences and similarities between the ideas. Even when applying a compare and contrast organizational pattern, a speaker can still have a separate point to give background of the 2 points you are comparing and contrasting. For example, if you wanted to write an informational presentation on how one island on Hawaii is different from another island, then you can organize it by having a main point that provides background about the Hawaiian Islands, followed by a second point that explains how Maui is similar to Oahu, and then a third point about how Maui is different than Oahu. There are still 3 main points, but the first main point provides the background information in order for your audience to understand your comparison. Yet another way to organize your content is through a spatial organization. This type of organizational pattern is useful when you want to organize ideas based on location. This form of organizing can also be used when explaining items that take up the same space but have different functions. For example, let's say you want to inform your audience about different Hawaiian island locations, but instead of comparing them, you just want to describe them. This could be organized by having 3 separate points that locate and describe 3 different island locations. You could also use this pattern to break down a specific area. For example, you could talk about a specific area on Oahu, like Honolulu, and break it apart by discussing tourist locations, dining locations, and hidden gems of the city. Another organizational pattern to consider is a chronological pattern. This is where you organize ideas based on when they occurred. You might be most familiar with this form of speaking when hearing about people's life over time or learning about historical events. For instance, if you were preparing a speech about the historical timeline of Hawaii, you could have main ideas about the settling of the Hawaiian Islands, the development of Hawaiian culture over time, and what life is currently like in Hawaii now. As you can see, it would not make much sense to kind of start in the middle of the story, but rather it would make more sense to tell your audience to follow the flow of historic events and the order that they happened. You can also organize content to demonstrate a sequential pattern of events. For instance, you can organize a speech about how the Hawaiian delicacy of poke is created by discussing the separate steps of the process of making the dish. Again, there's a certain order that is followed to get to the final outcome. Now, these are just a few different types of organizational patterns that you can use when planning the body of your speech. Most of these fit well with informational or entertainment type speeches. There are more styles of organization that are more appropriate for persuasive presentations. But no matter what pattern you select from, you want to make sure that your presentation keeps moving and that each main point is able to transition from one point to another point and has some logical consistency. Hopefully this brief video has helped you see that the development of your main points is crucial to your presentation, and it is an important aspect when finding your voice.
Speech Lab is brought to you through a generous grant from the National Communication Association.